Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging hour discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Tom K. Wilson, provides you with insight and guidance from his years of experience as a successful real estate entrepreneur on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate, and much, much more. Now, here's your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
Nice to have you with us. My golly, I love learning new things, and today we have opportunity for you to learn some more too. Appreciate you tuning in to our Real Estate Radio Live program, your number one source for all of your real estate investment needs and education. We're broadcasting from the number one business radio station in the San Francisco Bay Area, KDOW AM 1220, the Wall Street Business Network. I'm Tom K. Wilson, your host for the 2 p.m. Wednesday edition of Real Estate Radio Live that comes to you Wednesday and Friday at 2 p.m. and Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. along with my co-hosts Joe Kuchera, Mike D'Ambrosio, and Bobby Decker. If you can't make the live show, you can catch our podcast on TomWilsonProperties.com or on iTunes or on YouTube. You can go to TomWilsonProperties.com and sign up for our weekly newsletter that brings you economic news and related to real estate and real estate investing, and also find a lot of education information on our website. The newsletter also introduce you to new products as syndications and commercial and multifam and rental homes, mostly from the state of Texas, to all of our clients around the country. So we're have with us today in studio our good friend and frequent co-host, Michael Marangelo, who's the Bay Area Wealth Builder founder and president, one of the longest-running premier real estate investment clubs in the San Francisco Bay Area and in Northern California. And he also has a company, Sunvest. Michael is a very long-term investor, very creative financing expert. He's bought and sold thousands of notes, many of them all around the country. And he's a great teacher as well, and I've learned a lot from him. It's always a pleasure to have him on and to co-host with me.
Thanks for having me here, Tom. Look forward to it.
Indeed. And we have with us online today someone who's coming into town to speak and to be a workshop speaker along with John Hare, and that's Dyches Boddiford, whom we've had the pleasure of having on before. And Dyches is he's a national speaker, full-time real estate investor. I know he's started his career as a double E like I did and switched over to real estate. He found that was just as exciting or more so and more lucrative. Began purchasing real estate in 1980. In 86, he formed the Oaks Group to handle real estate-related activities, and since 91, he's devoted full-time to making this and related companies grow. Speaks from experience in owning apartments, single-family homes, mobile homes, buying discount mortgages, making mortgage loans, including using land trust and land contracts. And he's past president of the Georgia Real Estate Investors Association. So, Dyches, it's always a pleasure to have you, and it's a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you for having me on.
It's great. So how's the real estate business going on out there on the East Coast?
Well, it's a hot market right now. It's peaking, I think, in the next few months, and then we're going to see a little bit of a pullback, but that's a normal real estate cycle as long as it's not a deep pullback like we had in the 2007-2008 time frame. I think we'll be fine.
I find newcomers to our region here sometimes think that whatever cycle they're in is going to keep on going forever. And I say, well, no, it's not normal things here. In fact, the last one went up a little far, but I'm watching cycle number 5, and I would think we're probably about ready for a correction here. Oh, you mean we have another bubble?
Opportunity.
Yes, no, opportunities come up indeed. And then our listeners are real estate investors, and they often come up with a question of what to if they should do anything to help protect those assets. And I know you're going to talk a lot about that when you come out on this visit, but can you give us some tips and the kinds of things that you'll be talking more about when you come out?
Yeah, Tom, I think it's really interesting that a lot of real estate investors are running and gunning and doing the investments, and they don't think about the asset protection that they need to put in place, because everything is exposed if they're just doing everything in their own name. So at the weekend class, we will talk a lot about different entities and how those entities work together. For instance, corporations. When should you use a corporation versus an LLC? When should you use land trust, and how do these entities act together? And one thing a lot of people don't realize is the liability shield for a corporation and a LLC are very similar to each other. A few little differences, but they're very similar. And the real question becomes, what are the tax implications that will determine which it should be used, either the corporation or the LLC? And just as a shortcut today, we'll talk about a rule of thumb that for business-type ventures, which is like flipping property where you just buy it, fix it up, and resell it immediately, you might want to use, that's considered a business by the IRS, so you might want to use the corporation. For long-term hold properties, which you want all the tax advantages as if the property were in your own name, you want them to flow through the entity, so an LLC is probably the better entity for you in that case. Now, that's rule of thumb, but everybody's situation is different. So some people might have a little different structure, but that's the basic structure. Then you might want to consider using the land trust to further obscure ownership of the property, not for scamming someone, but for just keeping the frivolous lawsuits and the looky-loos away from trying to constantly be looking at you and what you have.
Dyches, what's the disadvantage of a land trust?
Disadvantage of the land trust, the biggest one, is that very few attorneys understand, and very few title companies understand the land trust. So you really have to be educated on how the land trust works so that you can answer questions and basically direct the closing. It's not that hard, but a lot of people would rather have an attorney involved, and there's just not that many attorneys that understand the land trust. That's the biggest disadvantages.
Is one of the mitigations of that to pull it out of the land trust when you do a transaction and then put the new one back in? Or?
That's a possibility, but I can tell you, if you understand what you're doing, you can usually convince the attorneys or title companies to do it appropriately rather than having to take it out. In other words, having another deed transfer or putting it in, having another deed transfer to do that.
And Dyches, I'm sorry, but just for the benefit of the audience, I know you're using the term land trust, which is sort of a foreign term for a lot of people, particularly here on the West Coast, because there is no land trust statute in California.
That's right.
We're really talking about a revocable form of trust. Just in name only is the term land trust appropriate.
That is correct. A lot of trusts have different names that kind of indicate what they do. In this case, it's a trust that is set up to hold real property, land or houses, that type of thing. You do not use land trust to hold mortgages because that's not real estate. You do not use land trust to hold property like boats and trailers and mobile homes that are not attached to the land. So it's just the term land trust just indicates what kind of trust, what kind of assets the trust might hold. And one thing about the trust that you also need to understand is it does not have a state-mandated liability shield. It is like a living trust used for estate planning, but it only holds real estate, not all the other assets that you might have in a regular living trust.
Its purpose is to make it more difficult for the public to see who the owner is. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it creates anonymity, and I think it's an important component, as you I know we're going to touch on at the workshop about these different entities, and of course trust being one of them, and how they work with one another. But a good friend of ours, as you know, has touted that the trust, or getting your name off title and owning properties in a format where they're not readily researchable, is really a form of security by obscurity.
It's a good way of putting it.
I'll remember that.
A lot of real estate investors that have property in land trust or even in corporations or LLCs have realized that they have avoided frivolous lawsuits because a contingency fee attorney in searching the courthouse can't find their individual names. And that's a benefit in itself. Sometimes you dodge a bullet and you don't even know that you did.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Now, in California, where even if you own a property in another state and it's being managed in another state, if you live here, they like to think that that's where you're managing it, and so therefore they're going to stick you with the $800 a year anyway.
Right.
And if you've got a property, a typical rental property in the heartland of America that's bringing in $2,500, $3,000 a year, and you pull $800 out of it, that's a big bite of your profit. So what's your answer to that, and especially as to whether or not an LLC is worth it, and especially in view of the fact that you got to have a problem, you can't solve. You got to get sued, lose the lawsuit, and liability insurance won't cover you. So I'm asking you kind of a devil's advocate question about does LLC always make sense?
And the LLCs makes a lot of sense in most cases. And there is an aggressive structure that I will present at the weekend showing what you can do if you live in California. Then I'll show you a less aggressive structure that you might use, but it gives you more exposure to potential liabilities, and then we'll talk about a structure that is not aggressive whatsoever and basically utilizes the trust and all to get things out of your name, but you still have to worry about liability because, again, the land trust or any trust for that matter does not have a statutory liability shield in any state for a standard revocable type trust. So we'll talk about all those different levels. And if you go to the aggressive level, I know people that have 300 and 400 houses in California that only pay California for one or two entities that they have holding all of those properties, but holding them in such a way that the liabilities divided up between different segments of those properties.
So there's a way to do that. So if you get a lawsuit on one of those properties within that LLC, it doesn't expose the other products within that LLC?
Yeah, well, within a single LLC, if one property brings a liability, it's going to potentially, if there's a judgment rendered, potentially affect anything else that that one LLC owns, not the other LLCs that may be owned by the same person. But so dividing up the liability between the properties within the LLC, we'll talk about some practical ways to do that. One way that we can talk about in the next segment is...
Dyches, I'm sorry, I got to cut you off here. We're finished with this segment, and we'll be back here in just a moment to have more with Dyches Boddiford. So stay with us here on KDOW Real Estate Radio Live, the Wall Street Business Network, and with Michael Marangelo, who has helped me co-host today, and we'll be right back.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
Welcome back. Michael Marangelo in the studio with me today, talking to Dyches Boddiford, who will be out here for a workshop and speaking engagement in October 22nd and 23rd of 2016, if you happen to be listening to this podcast before that time. And if not, you can always go to assets101.com. Is that right, Dyches?
That's correct.
All right. And you can also go to TomWilsonProperties.com to get reference to Dyches there, and look up the podcast and rerun that. So we're taking advantage of Dyches' long experience in this investment business, and we're talking about asset protection and different structures that he's going to talk about in more detail when he comes out on how you can protect your assets and yet minimize the tax impact in states like California. Dyches, what's your take on the value of setting up LLCs in other states like Wyoming and Nevada to help protect you from a single-member entity status?
Yes, I think that setting up an LLC in another state can be very valuable to you, and you got to pick the state. You got to do a little jurisdiction shopping to decide where the best for you would be. And we will be talking about that. That's not something that the real estate investor with one house needs to be concerned with, but need to be thinking for the future, because once you get up to several houses, you need to be looking at using some of these structures that are afforded in other states that may not be in your home state, and ways to shelter the cost of having these entities in multiple states. One of the things that we were talking about in the last segment was that the entities can become very cumbersome if you have too many of them cost-wise and keeping up with them. And another thing you might do to reduce the exposure is reduce the equities that you have in property. One way to do that is what's called equity stripping. Equity stripping is what you do anytime you go to the bank and get a loan against the house. The house stands for that loan, and is on the public records as a mortgage that shows that the house is standing for that loan. And therefore, that it comes in front of any potential judgments that might come down the road, and would discourage someone coming after you to litigate, because it's not apparent that you have a lot of equity in that property. Now, we will, over the weekend, talk about 4 or 5 different equity stripping techniques. Only the first one involves going and getting a loan from the bank. We'll talk about using other entities and financial friends that might have mortgages on property that you have that are not necessarily loans that you have outstanding. And if you're questioned about it in a court, you're definitely going to have to tell the truth about what it is and how it's set up. But we'll talk about just from the view of someone looking at the courthouse records, how it would obscure what equity that you really have in the property, and will hopefully discourage someone coming after you. So
again, anytime you can have a potential plaintiff not think that you've got any real value, then that may be successful enough to have them go away and not spend the money trying to go after it. Absolutely. And can you give a little teaser on an example of a type of entity stripping technique? Well, you may have a financial friend that owns a company either in state or it might be in one of these other states that we were talking about, and he may have a mortgage in the courthouse against one of your properties, and it looks like a regular old 30-year mortgage. But internally, you have a note which is not put on public record, and that note is a equity line of credit, and you haven't drawn one red cent on that equity line of credit. But it shows up like all of it's out. That's correct. Mm-hmm. Now, that's got to be done correctly and all, because you can't be doing something that's scamming the public or scamming or scamming a creditor. But there are ways to set that up so that at least before litigation occurs, everyone is convinced that there is no equity in the property. Boy, I sure like that approach. I like those kinds of things. So that's great. So those are the kinds of things that Dyches has not only learned about, but has utilized over the years, and his many years of experience here in real estate investing that are just great to learn about. And more of it that you can learn when he comes out on this workshop, or go to his assets101.com, assets101.com. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more. Yep.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live. Streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
Michael Marangelo with me today, co-hosting Dyches Boddiford, longtime investor and educator. It's so good to have him back, and we look forward to him being out here in end of October for workshops and speaking engagements to learn more. So let's talk about benefits of and differences between, say, a S corp and an LLC, and how you pick which one to use.
Right. The corporation always gives more benefits than the LLC or partnerships do. And one of the primary benefits is reducing the amount of self-employment tax that you have to pay. For instance, if you flip a bunch of properties and you make, say, $80,000 or $90,000 a year, the difference between having that come through a LLC or come through a corporation can be quite significant. You'll pay the same in regular income tax, but you won't have a lot of the self-employment tax. For instance, self-employment tax is basically 15.3% of earnings. So if you've got earned income, which, again, business type of income, flipping properties, would generate earned income. For a $90,000 income, you'd have about $13,700 in self-employment taxes. That's over and above regular income taxes. But if you put that in an S corporation and you only paid yourself, say, a salary of, say, $40,000, and the rest came through, you could cut your Social Security and Medicare taxes, which is the employment taxes, from $13,700 down to about $7,000, a savings of $6,000. Now, $6,000 of savings can be quite significant when you're having to pay an $800 franchise tax just to have the corporation, and can make it very worthwhile.
Dykes, how do you decide how much to draw as the salaried or president of your company? I would think if you get
as an employee,
I would think if you get too low, is that going to raise a computer flag or just be a problem if you're in audit? Or?
Tom, you're exactly right. It will raise a flag if you make it too low. The IRS is looking for people that have corporations, S corporations particularly, that don't pay any salary whatsoever. But if you meet with the board of directors and they set your salary, and unless you're schizophrenic, you're not, and argue with yourself, you're not going to have much of a problem setting your salary. But your salary being about 40 to 60% of the net profit after everything else is paid out, but before your salary is paid, is adequate in the IRS's eyes for most businesses.
Okay.
You'll hear accountants and CPAs in continuing education classes talking about 60%, but I've heard someone that actually writes letter rulings for the IRS say that he hasn't seen the IRS go after anyone that paid at least 40%.
Well, I would think it would be more related to what the fair market value would be for that position in another company than it was what it happened to be as a percent.
Specifically about real estate right now, so that's basically what the real estate businesses are brought in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Nice. I understand. So you've got to be really think deeply about what kind of entity you have, and it's not just a matter of what protection it gives you, but what kind of tax consequences there are. That may be often the deciding factor on which kind of entity that you have.
We can talk a little bit about other benefits that you get out of the entities as well.
All right, so let's cover that there in the next segment. We've got Dyches Boddiford on board with us here today, and we'll cover some more about how you protect your assets and your real estate that you've worked so hard to get, but you don't want to lose. Stay with us.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
What a pleasure to have Dyches Boddiford back on board with us today. And we're talking about ways to protect the real estate that you worked so hard to get. Michael, I think you had a couple more questions or points.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, we're really fortunate to have Dyches come out and visit with us later, October 22nd, 23rd of this year in 2016. But and I know that during this visit, he'll talk about asset protection. We talked a little bit on the program today about that, creating privacy and being able to do business privately, how to diversify and not keep all your eggs necessarily in one basket, how to simplify your business activities, obviously tax savings, which is a huge part for any entrepreneur to minimize Uncle Sugar reaching into our pockets, and estate planning too, if you've accumulated some assets over a period of time, and how to protect those and provide for passing those on. But one of the big things, because there's a lot of confusion about all of these different entities and how to use them and which one to use and when to use them. And I know we're going to simplify that during the 2 days of discussion, but also once you have a plan formulated, you don't, and you've implemented it, you don't have to really give a lot of thought about these other entities, but just whether or not you want to do a transaction or not. And I know, Dyches, you were talking about benefits, and maybe you want to pick up again on some of the more of the benefits available for these different entities.
Right. There are several other benefits that business people get, not just in real estate, but in any kind of business where income is earned. Like, again, in real estate, is flipping houses or developing or building or whatever.
Or owning rentals, too.
Managing rentals.
Yeah, managing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just holding rental property would be more passive, and you want that because you get your depreciation and so forth that you don't get coming through a corporation. But the corporation can provide more benefits for its owner. For instance, if you are the only owner and employee, or if it's you and your spouse, then you can still have a solo 401k. And a solo 401k is like a super IRA because you can put up to $18,000 in the solo 401k each year, even if your salary is only, say, $18,000. So as long as your salary is more than the $18,000, you can put up to $18,000. And if you're age 50 or older, you can put in another $6,000 on top of that. So you could put up to $24,000 in, and that rises with inflation over the years.
And is this in either a S or C corp?
In SRC corp, correct. Okay. And you can have two different components within the 401k. One is traditional 401k, which is like a traditional IRA, and the second is a Roth component, like a Roth IRA. And the big advantage, not only of being able to stuff this 401k with more money than you can in a regular IRA, is you can be both the administrator and the trustee of the 401k, which means you have check writing ability legally under the IRS rules. And you have a local bank account. You keep up, and it's your responsibility keeping up all the accounting on that solo 401k. You can even borrow money out of that solo 401k. So there's a lot of advantages to that single benefit. Another benefit is that you can get your health insurance paid. And in these days of Obamacare or affordable health care, or whatever you want to call it, that's a lot of expense, and it gets very difficult to write off deductibles, write off insurance premiums. With the corporation, there's a straightforward way that is still available for doing that. And during the weekend, I'll show you exactly what forms and where things go on those forms that will allow you to write off every dollar of your health care from the first all the way up to however much you have to spend,
now,
whether it be for deductibles or policy.
Is that restricted to C Corp for medical?
No, that's S Corp as well. As a matter of fact, I get my health insurance through the S Corporation. So we'll talk exactly how to accomplish that.
Okay.
All right. There are other benefits as well, such as the corporation being able to loan you money or to borrow money from third parties, other sources. There are more minor types of things, such as the corporation paying for your HSA account, which is a health savings account to allow you to be able to meet deductibles. And if you're older, it can also pay for Medicare insurance as well. Though you can't make more contributions to the HSA, and after you start on Medicare, you can still use the funds that are in an existing HSA to pay Medicare premiums and deductibles as well until you've exhausted the account.
Dyches, I know that you'll be touching on also the way to properly operate and the formalities involved in these, because those things need to be paid attention to as well. As people set these entities up, they don't follow protocol and they can get themselves in trouble. And so there are some relatively easy formalities, but that people need to be aware of associated with each of these different entities.
We have a little less. We have a little
documentation.
We have a little less, Dyches, a little less than a minute in this segment, so just give us a little overview, if you will.
Okay. The main thing that you have to do is keep up minutes of meetings. So you have a shareholders meeting every year to appoint board of directors meeting every year to appoint officers. 2 sheets of paper. Every year the date changes on the paper, but typically for small businesses like we run, nothing else changes. So that is a very easy formality to keep up. But there are other formalities we'll talk about during the weekend.
Okay. All right. Good. So, again, coming up on October 22nd, 23rd, there's a workshop that's being held. And what's the location, Michael?
It's going to be at the South San Francisco Conference Center, so right now near the SFO airport. And
Dyches Boddiford will be there, and John Heyer, and they both will be covering as comprehensively as you can imagine all of these topics that have to do a lot with how to protect what you have.
Yeah, and John Heyer says he's not going to be billing for his time either.
Okay, so we'll be back for a wrap-up here in just one moment with Dyches Boddiford. Stay with us here on KDOW Real Estate Radio Live. This is Tom Wilson.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
What a pleasure to have Dyches Boddiford back on the program with us, a multi-decade, very active investor in many aspects of it, and especially in the area of how to keep and protect what you've got. Dyches, any little couple points you want to wrap up with as a little summary?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Tom. I really do believe the first line of defense for every real estate investor is good insurance. We'll spend some time talking about what good insurance entails. But that's your front line of defense. The best lawyers in the country are on retainer with the insurance companies, so utilize them. But once you have gone past the limits of the policy, or if anyone's read all the limitations on policies these days, if you're sued outside of that, you want to have the entities in place to protect you. At the same time, you want to minimize your IRS bill as well, your income taxes. So we'll talk about how the different entities do that and yet still put the same amount of money or more in your pocket.
And I recall from talking to you in the past, Dyches, that one of the, if I remember correctly, one of the most overlooked things is to prevent is to do things to minimize the potential of a problem in the first place, right?
That's right.
Either from not letting people know what you own, or make sure you don't have some obvious hazard that your property manager hasn't taken care of in the property, and
Right.
Things like that. So I think those are
and treat people right on top of everything else.
Yes. I think most. I always tell people the first line of defense is if there is a problem that comes up, make sure you or your property manager is on top of it and solve it, and before it festers and gets to be a big deal, right?
Right, exactly.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to you being out here. All right. Thank you. So if you want more information that Dyches has available on the website, go to assets101.com. And Michael, you want to do a little wrap up for us here?
Yeah, let's. This is a very, very valuable class. Entity structuring, asset protection, minimizing taxes is really an area I think that most entrepreneurs or every investor or business person needs to have a good understanding of. And this class is going to be covering a lot of the advantages, the disadvantages of the C Corp, the S Corp, the limited liability companies, the trusts, and how they interact with one another, and also how to do business more efficiently, which is a code word for paying less taxes. The Dyches, I know, has talked about it, and he talked about it on the program today, that we live in a society that's very litigious. And it is said that the 20th century terrorist is the contingency fee lawyer. And so the whole focus of this 2-day class in October 22nd and 23rd is to learn more about how to keep more of what you've earned and to protect what you own. We'd love to have people find more information. It's going to be, you can go to our website, www.bawb.info. Again, that's www.bawb.info, and just look for the workshop link. And it's a great, great event, and we really look forward to having people come out.
And thank you, Michael, for co-hosting this again today. And also, make sure you go every month to Michael's Bay Area Wealth Builder Real Estate Investment Club. It's a wonderful education resource and a great networking resource, and Michael always shares a lot of his great knowledge as well. And go to TomWilsonProperties.com for a lot of education information and the products that we have available. Remember, the only thing that matters is what you do next.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Tune in, log in, download our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com. RERadiolive.com.